All right, so we have kicked off the PatternFly-Next broadcast. It's just, okay, I have confirmed that it is working now live in YouTube as well. And we have a couple viewers, a couple people have been able to make it in, 8 viewers now, awesome. So just so you all know, we are trying out this demo in YouTube for a couple of reasons. One, it makes it more accessible to those outside of Red Hat. There's been some issues with Blue Jeans. Second, this will automatically post to our YouTube channel where we will now feature all of these meeting recordings, again, making it more accessible, and it actually goes, the playback is faster than what you see in Blue Jeans. So some things to know is that all the presenters are in presenter mode, and so they can be seen and heard. I'm happy to share that link. The way that this is set up is that I don't get that link until right when I start it. And so I will put that in the chat now if anyone wants to join that, so that if you do have questions and you want to actually say your questions verbally, then welcome to join with that link. One thing you do need to know is that you have to use your personal Gmail. Otherwise, you are free to just view it in the live mode, which does not give you video or voice, but you are able to use chat to ask your questions, and I'm happy to monitor that and make sure that your questions are answered. So however you want to try. And I'm hoping that you guys got the link to the Hangouts. I will put it in the other chat as well, just to see. Okay, so now that that business has been taken care of, this is our second PatternFly-Next demo. This is just some time to share everything that's going on within the PatternFly-Next area. We have a survey that will correspond with each meeting, so I will send a link to that as well right now. You can do this 2 ways. You can take a look at it. You can go ahead and open now, and so that you can follow along with the meeting and provide your feedback live, or you can absolutely open the survey and fill it out later. And again, of course, you're welcome to ask questions here, provide feedback here as well. But this is just another mechanism to gather feedback. So on the agenda today, we have a variety of things, including visual design, CSS, and a couple of general updates. I've also added an update about migration, which I didn't originally have on the agenda that I sent out, but that got added on. All right, so we will get kicked off with Kyle and Libby that are going to be talking about aligning with the Red Hat brand.
All right, I'm gonna try to share, see what happens. Did it work? You good? All right, I'm gonna hope that it worked. All right, so today we're gonna talk about aligning PatternFly with Red Hat brand. This is something that I worked with, as you just heard Leslie say, I worked with Libby from the brand, who is one of the lead designers in the brand team, to come up with like a strategy for how we're going to more closely align PatternFly with the Red Hat core brand. A lot of this, to be clear, a lot of this is strategy we were already using for the current PatternFly, so we just extended that out more. And I'm going to talk about some reasons why we're doing that. So as the same with the current version of PatternFly, PatternFly 3, we created PatternFly. The biggest reason is just to create consistency across our entire Red Hat application portfolio. And that's a lot of applications. And to do that, we needed to create an open source project, which is PatternFly. So we want to continue to do that and provide a cohesive system that's going to work for a lot of different applications. But aligning a little bit closer to our core brand allows us to make our application just part of our whole customer experience. So it starts with sales and marketing, and then they're going to use the application. They're going to need documentation to go with that, and also support. There's a lot of different channels, and all of those channels work cohesively with that core brand, and we're trying to make the applications do that same thing. And so it works as a system to give a cohesive experience across the whole customer life cycle. So that's one of our big goals that we've been trying to meet. And the other thing is Red Hat is focused a lot on product integration. So how do we make a seamless experience across multiple products? You know, whether we just acquired a product, are we making a product? It doesn't really matter. How do we have a cohesive experience across all of those? So aligning closer to the core brand is going to allow us to do that. And then again, become part of that cohesive, holistic customer experience with, like I said, the sales, documentation, support. And then the other thing is, how do we allow all those teams and all those different places, how do we allow them to be more agile? And one of the ways we do that is everybody follows the core brand, so we don't have a lot of duplication of efforts, and we can share resources, and it makes it easier for everybody to work together. And they can be more agile. And then when you're converting our applications from upstream to downstream, there's traditionally not a lot of resources for that. So we want to make it as easy for them as possible. So tying a little bit closer to our core brand allows us to make that transition a lot smoother and easier. And that was one of the principles for PatternFly 3, but now we're just taking that and extending it out. And the same, as I said, you know, we want to make it easier for our teams to integrate with us. So extending PatternFly out to work for what they're doing for some of the other teams, and all that, being closer to the core brand allows us to do that. So it allows us to work with a lot more people and gets us a lot more resources, and allows us to have better support. Anything you want to add, Libby?
No.
Awesome. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a line on that.
No questions? All right. That's it.
Yeah, and Kyle, just to be aware, there is like a 10-second delay on the live feed versus what we have. So I will let you know if any other chat questions pop up.
Great, thank you.
All right, our next presentation is showing the login visual design. Michael Saldonia will be presenting that.
Yep. Okay. You guys see that?
Yep.
Oh, is that showing the wrong screen?
Yeah, I can see like the next slide as well.
Oh, okay, yeah, hang on. There we go. That should work.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so with the login screen, we wanted to keep it as simple and as functional as possible, but we also wanted to use it to highlight one of our kind of defining visual elements, which is the background image overlay. So what better way to do that than with the full bleed background image? And you can see here we kind of use the kind of panel on the left here for the functional login components, and then we use the image overlay area on the right as more of a place for information-based content. So by using this left-aligned layout, we fix a issue with the previous design, which struggled with long product names and content. There's just a lot more room for that stuff now. And the layout actually uses a golden ratio, which leads to a more balanced and just clean feeling composition overall. So we were also considering functionality improvements. So for example, if the user is interested in logging in with the social option at the bottom there, and they hit the More button, we just go ahead and take over that the whole panel, just for a much more clean approach, both experientially and visually, instead of trying to like fit it all in that previous panel. Another thing we're considering is the scalability and the responsiveness of the design. And the nice thing about this is that the design actually scales the exact same way as the current PatternFly design, which just kind of keeps things more simple when they're building it. And by considering the responsiveness this early, we're actually also able to catch and solve issues like finding the need for example, the need to place some of this information content under this information icon just because of space issues. So by being able to do that, we kind of catch that early on and don't have to figure it out later on when it's almost too late. That's pretty much it. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Great, thanks, Michael. So next up, we're going to be talking about the global variables and guidelines. Andres and Matt Carlton have been working on this. Andres is on holiday, and so Matt Carlton will be presenting.
All right. Let me show my screen. Why can I not see my options? Oh, hold on. Is that working? Now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, so for since the last time we presented this, we've made some changes to how the global variables are working. One thing, and this is
Matt, sorry to interrupt you. Can you zoom in? It's really blurry.
Yeah, sorry, my screens are. I wonder what the best way to do this. This might be terrible because hold on, I'm gonna stop for a second and put it on my laptop screen because I think
that works
better. One second. Is that better?
Can't see your screen yet.
Oh.
You get to share it.
There. Better?
Yes, that is better.
Okay, cool. Okay, yeah. So since the last time we presented this, we've just made some changes to the way variables are working, and this is the work that Andreas did that I'll be talking about. But we did make some changes to the naming of variables and some other tweaks. But the most notable one in this PR was the spacers. So we just adjusted the spacers. So you'll see if you take a look at this PR, you'll just see that all the spacers and all the components and everything are updated. The next thing that we did, which was probably the bigger thing here, was we ended up switching our CSS variables to Sass variables. And the main reason for this is just support. We can't support IE11 with CSS variables, so unfortunately we have to drop them and move to Sass variables. But ultimately, it doesn't really make any difference to the end user. It's just nicer to use something like CSS variables for a bunch of different reasons. But for support reasons, we're gonna drop them and move to Sass. That might change in the future, but for now, we'll just stick with the Sass variables. And then if you go to pfnext.com and check out the guidelines, you'll see that this is updated there. So anywhere there was CSS variables, you'll see it's all switched over to Sass variables, and it's the exact same thing. It's just swapping one out for the other. And then the last thing was theming. So one thing that we've been working on with the designers is just coming up with a theme for everything. So all of our theme variables. So we've basically, I took a document that Michael put together and updated our theme, like background colors and text colors. So previously this would have been like, for background colors, it would have been background light and then background light alt. And that's not super flexible and it can't grow. So we've adjusted it based on the variables, the theme colors that they've come up with so far. So as you can see, it's like 100, 200, 300, and this can be way more flexible. So we're trying to keep things as small as possible for things like that. But if it's necessary, we can adjust this and add to things. So it's a lot more flexible for things as the design grows. But that's pretty much it. Any questions? Cool.
All right. Thanks, Matt. So next we have our demos for layouts. Layouts is a concept that we have where it's a page in which you would put components. So it's just how components are laid out on a page and how that's responsive. And we have a number of layouts. So starting us off will be Matt Nolting with Grid.
Great. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yep, you can see it.
Appropriately. Okay. So the goal of our grid system was to use Flexbox. I'm sorry, not Flexbox, but Grid. Flexbox is a fallback. But use Grid to build a CSS framework. And so this is an example. This is just a proof of concept that shows the responsiveness of that grid, base being full width, right, for any mobile device, and then growing up from that. And this is all grid. So growing up from that with support for just a base grid with no gutters, and then a grid with gutters, with offsets with gutters, nested grids, and row spans. And so the challenge was to provide an IE11 fallback. So as you can see, let me show you this. This is the amount of code that it took to build the grid itself using CSS Grid, which is fantastic. It's 22 lines of code. That in conjunction with a media query mix-in created all of this grid, which is fantastic. The fallback was a little bit more complex, and so in order to, let me start this up. In order to create that fallback, so we're using FlexBit Grid to create that fallback, and it was relatively easy to do base grid with no margins. But when you include gutters, we had to calculate using the CSS calc function grid width, grid item width minus the margins that you would include. So you can append PF has gutters to this wrapper, and it will append all of these, all the appropriate margining and width for your grid layout here. The only thing that is not supported in IE11 is the row span, which is pretty much impossible. I have no idea how to do that, despite abundant research. So if anybody has any feedback on that, let me know. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you'd like any more detail, let me know. But these are the base classes. These are the modifiers for responsiveness, and these are all the grid gutter classes. That's about it.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Okay.
So next we'll have Dana with page layout.
All right, let's see if I can share a screen here. Okay, so just another layout quick. That's still up in a pull request right now. And essentially, this adds a layout with a top header, vertical navigation, and then the idea would be that we would also have a main area in it. So this is what it looks like. You can see the layouts have the dotted line around them to give a feel for what's happening, with a left and a right area in the top header, as well as the navigation. This would grow, obviously, for it, but we're using this these dotted lines to express what the layout would look like, just so it's very clear where the areas where content will go. And then hopefully in the future we start to build some demos that would use these. But right now they're very much almost utilities, kind of calling them, as far as providing a good way to lay out the various components and parts of the page. So that's it for that one. Pretty quick.
All right. Next is Sarah with more layouts.
Okay. Okay, you can see my screen, I hope. So what I did was work on more of these sort of utility layouts. these 5 here listed, and the task was to add a gutter option and then also just generally clean them up and make sure that they work in IE11 also. So I'll just run through each one quickly. Bullseye, actually, I did not add a gutter option to that because it didn't seem to make sense in this case. The gallery, here you see it without the gutter, and then by adding the PF has gutter, then it adds a default gutter, which is the large spacer right now. Level is a layout that just spreads the children across. So you can see there's 2 and 3, and then down here I've added one that has the gutter option on it. And if I narrow that down, you can see that it's maintaining a gutter space in here. The next one is the split layout, which basically positions its children horizontally, and either the second child or the one you specify as the primary will take the main space. It will take up the any remaining space, and you can see the normal one here, and then with gutters added here, and you can see those gutters are maintained. And then the last one is the stack, which is basically exactly like split, but vertically. So the contents are stacked, and the primary content takes up the any available space. So here it is with the gutters applied. And that is everything, unless there are any questions.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties. I was fixing the chat and forgot to click on your thumbnail to share the beginning of your presentation.
Okay. Do you need me to do anything, or is it
maybe can we get just while we're sharing your screen again, recap that maybe in a nutshell again?
Sure. Am I still sharing?
You're still sharing now. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
All right. So just to go back to the bullseye layout actually didn't need any changes because it didn't really make sense to put a gutter on that. The gallery, you can see the layout here without gutters, and then by adding PF has gutter, it adds the large spacer as a gutter. You can see that's maintained for the different viewports. Level lays out the children evenly spaced, and so when you add the gutter, I kind of had to put a little more content in there, and once I squish it down, you can see that that gutter is maintained, even though when it's wider, it may have more space in between. And then the last two split. The primary content area, which is either the second child or the one you specify with PF is primary, will take up most of the space. Here you can see no gutter, and then here you can see that with PF has gutter, it adds that gutter space. And then the last one, stack, is exactly the same, but it's vertical instead of horizontal. And here it is with the gutter. Okay.
Thank you for going over that again.
No
Appreciate
problem.
it. All right, next up we have Dana with the both the PR improvements or enhancements, as well as a bit more about migration.
All right, let's see. My screen's being shown here. So let me know if you can see my screen.
I can see it.
Okay. So one thing with the PRs that's been connected is the ability to preview them. Previously, it was hidden behind the hide all checks here in GitHub, but we've surfaced that to the top. So PatternFly build will comment on your PRs when you add them, and that's where you get a nice deploy preview that you can look at. So like for the page one that I just showed, you'll be able to look at that, and that also helps with reviewing too, so someone else can come and look and make sure things are responsive, and that the content is matches the design. So that's there, as well as the commit. So that should be visible on any of them. And if it starts to break on anything, let us know, because we want that there present for any pull request. And then the other thing we've been talking about migration to the next version of PatternFly from PatternFly 3. So we want to just briefly talk about our working theories and what we're prototyping with right now. The way the CSS is being built, we're not prevented from having an application that uses both PatternFly 3 and the next version of PatternFly side by side. So what this screen kind of shows in a rough way is that there's no reason why a PatternFly 3 component couldn't sit inside of the same site as like a next version navigation or a list view, or even inside one of our layouts, because of the way we've built that. There's no collision with the CSS. So how can we do that then? Like, what's that going to look like in reality? Within product code right now, many products are using PatternFly 3 CSS. But what we can do with the next version of PatternFly is create a PatternFly 3 theme, and that will allow the next components to look like the PatternFly 3 components and sit side by side without significant visual discrepancy. That would require both versions of the CSS be pulled in, and then also have a PatternFly 3 theme applied, which we're hoping to ship with PatternFly-Next, just so that we still have that, because we know the visuals are quite different, what we're seeing. So what's going to happen beneath the surface is a lot of teams are using our PatternFly React component repo. And the idea would be if they're using, say, a list view right now that has internally the PatternFly 3 HTML and CSS, that our team will convert the HTML and CSS to the new form. And then the product will just continue using the list view just by taking a new version of PatternFly React and pulling in PatternFly-Next CSS. They'll get the new robust HTML and modular CSS without really needing to modify much of their site other than including a new CSS file, and once they take the new version of the component. So hopefully our goal is that by using these component repos, it's going to take away quite a bit of the conversion cost from people outside just consumers of PatternFly or the customers of it. And if by using these, or even starting a project with them now, it's going to hopefully ease the transition. And we're planning through our next sprint to prototype more of this as we move away from layouts into actual component work. We can really try this out both inside of our PatternFly React repo and in some of the products and websites that we work on as a team. So that's it for that. That's what our working model for migration. But I don't know if there's comments or anything in the chat on that one.
I don't see anything yet. So more to come on this. But I guess one of the things I just wanted to highlight is from this demo, a lot of what you've seen with the layouts and the variables, that is what comprises our first alpha. So that will be our foundation, and as we move forward with additional alphas. I don't see any other questions coming through, and that is all we had on our agenda. So we will be sending out an email with a link to the playback here, as well as that survey again. So I apologize for having the chat not enabled from the get-go. It should be enabled now. And I will make sure to fix that for next time. If there's any other feedback that you have about your experience with this YouTube we'll continue to try to refine this and make it a better experience. But all ears for anything that any feedback that you might have.
So Leslie, there was a question in the chat about browser usage. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the actual question is, if we have any data on it, but we are planning on supporting IE11. And then I know there's been some other questions about mobile browsers, but I think if it may be for I don't know if on the PatternFly Slack, on either the PatternFly-Next channel or even in the general channel, if people have specific questions, maybe do you think that would be a better spot for kind of follow up on that one, Leslie?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. Yeah, and specifically, like what sort of questions about browser usage are people looking for, as far as like just an official support statement, or what sort of research has been done into that? I think are the questions on our end. Yeah, I don't see if there's anything else in the chat. Yeah, Kevin Nitz has a question. Do we have access to the data you use to drive decisions? I don't know if that's one you have.
Is that specifically for the browser support, Kevin? Oh yeah, because he says there was a question with the browser support usage. Yeah, we can follow up a bit more about that one. All right, anything else? All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Okay, so long.
See ya.